This was November 2016 in Glasgow, Scotland. I was desperate, I must admit it. I've been single and alone for some time, and it was driving me crazy. That's when I met Laura. She came across as a very sweet girl and all, but she was in a hurry to meet me, so I did. She insisted we go to the pub. No fancy dates were necessary to her. I didn't mind this. At first glance, I knew I'd been swindled. She looked different from what I'd saw before. But I didn't mind. I was just happy to have a date. I'm not exactly good looking myself. I gave her a chance to redeem herself. We got talking, and after a few beers, things started to get more intimate. Before I go further, she was quite an overweight girl with long dark hair, and she had eyeshadow similar to Amy Winehouse. She said she was a huge fan. I'd ask her about her hobbies and interests, etc., but she asked me to talk more about myself. I told her about my job. She yawned sarcastically. "Let's talk about your sex life," she said. She had slipped her foot out of her shoe and started rubbing my groin with her bare foot. Needless to say, I was aroused. So yeah, I didn't have much to say in that department, as it had been a long while since I had sex. I was very honest with her. I asked about hers, and she said she has her kinks and that she's done things that I'd never have imagined. "I want to see what I can do," she said. "Let's go to my place." So at this point, I was starting to feel very drunk, which I was amazed at. I was only onto my 4th pint. I did have 2 shots though, and put it down to this. We'd waited for a taxi. She was holding my hand, excitedly whispering into my ear that she was going to do some things to me that I'd never experienced before. In a way, I actually couldn't wait to just sleep. My head felt heavier than the rest of my body. It was like the ground was moving beneath my feet. The rest was a blur. I couldn't even remember getting into the taxi, but I do remember falling down the stairs, and she was above me laughing at me. "Come on," she said, "get your sexy ass up here." I struggled up the stairs. Before I knew it, from what I remember, I was in her bedroom naked. It was like I'd blacked out. I tried to sit up, only to find myself tied to the bed by my arms and legs. Then she entered the room dressed in bondage gear. I was deeply aroused but confused at the same time. She performed sex acts on me before having full intercourse. I lay there delighted, don't get me wrong, but something still felt off about it all. I had dozed off for a bit, and I'd been waken up by a weird screeching sound. "What are you doing?" I'd said as she was wrapping up my legs with cling film. "Hush now," she said. "This is the best bit." I was no longer tied to the bed, but I felt very numb, and I couldn't move my arms or legs. She kept wrapping me up from my legs upwards, and I was screaming at her to stop. And she had placed some cling film in my mouth to shut me up. I was struggling to breathe at this point and had tried my best to dislodge the ball of cling film from my mouth. Eventually, I was totally wrapped from head to toe. I could barely see outside the cling film. She told me that this was my punishment for being terrible in bed, and that she has many other victims just like me, all wrapped up waiting to die. She left the room, and I gave out some muffled screams. Then I felt myself slowly fading away. I woke up what was now the next day, now able to breathe. This time, there were people looking at me. They removed most of the cling film and had resuscitated me. I wasn't aware of this till they told me. It had turned out that I wasn't actually in Laura's flat, but in an old-fashioned hotel. The police were all over me asking me questions about what had happened. I attempted to show them her Tinder profile, but she had deleted the page. I'm grateful to my rescuers that had saved me, but forever traumatized by this incident, and I end up with panic attacks when I see people that are similar to her. It took me a few years to finally trust people enough to go on dates, but I am still on the road to recovery mentally. I'm just glad that I'm still alive, but wondering if she's still out there, and if there are others like me that didn't make it. Two summers ago, I, 21 female, got a membership for a local gym. It was about 2 minutes away from my summer job, so I usually went to the gym after work to avoid a ton of driving. My shifts were 6 to 10 p.m., and I'd leave the gym by 11. Now, I live in a small and generally safe town, so my guard has always been down. One night while I was working out, a man who looked to be in his mid to late 30s started making small talk with me. We were the only two people there, and I'm a people pleaser, so my responses were always courteous, but as short as possible. I never asked questions or kept the conversation going. I didn't think much of it, but each time I came back, this man would either greet me or make small talk. And I'd be polite, but my headphones in as soon as possible. It didn't feel that serious or fair to me to start going out of my way to avoid him, until one night. I got off work around 10 p.m. as usual and went to the gym. That man was there along with another middle-aged man, and I got a short workout in. After I went back to my car, the gym was in a shopping center and the parking lot was huge and dark. All of the stores closed pretty early. Out of habit, I locked my car when I go inside and then started texting my boyfriend. Suddenly, I heard my passenger side door handle get tugged on. Hard. Hard enough that if my car wasn't locked, it absolutely would have opened. I looked up and saw the man looking in and smiling. He laughed at the fact that I probably looked startled, waved, and walked away. I'm not sure if he was planning anything or was just trying to prank me, but either way, it was so creepy and inappropriate that I stopped going to that gym at night for the rest of the summer. So, my friend and I are underaged, a little buzzed from party hopping all night. We roll up to Wendy's and ditch the empty bottles of Smirnoff Ice as we wait for our food at 2 a.m. in the drive-thru. I had no idea that it was illegal to be out past a certain time if you're under 18, unsupervised, and it's past 12 p.m. in Arizona. I catch a text from a friend, and she asked me to get her order, and we will meet at the intersection and eat with us. Okay, sounds chill enough. I got to the intersection, and there aren't any gas stations or grocery stores, just some creepy office buildings and a dirt lot. I stupidly picked the dirt lot to wait for my friend, who calls me and is like, "Hey, I'm at the intersection, are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, oh, I see you." And she's like, "Is that you with the cops behind you?" And I was like, "No," only to discover that in fact, cops were behind me. Luckily, the car smelled like food and not booze and cigarettes. But this cop knew I was under the influence and had a large bottle of rum that had already been opened that I desperately to hide under a shit from my car before he knocked on my window. He's not stupid. And it's fucking Arizona. No one gets away with a DUI in Tent City Central. This cop asked me and my friend for our parents' phone numbers. My friend's mom gets a call to come pick her up, and gets a verbal lashing from the cop about being underage past curfew and explains the citation, so I already knew that was coming. I, however, didn't have a voicemail set up on my new Nokia Fat phone and refused to give my parents' house phone back when there was still everywhere. I told him they simply didn't have one, only a cell number, and I put it to silent as he repeatedly calls. I tell him they are probably out with friends themselves, and the cop says okay, explains the ticket to me. I think I'm going to get away scot-free when he says he's going to follow me home. I made sure to go the speed limit and not make any errors, but I'm shitting myself right now. I parked my car out front of my house and my parents' cars are in the closed garage. Dark house. I'm like, yes, it looks like no one is home. The cop proceeded to park his car and says, hey, you could have broke the rules a little with getting home. I wasn't going to pull you over twice now, as he followed me to the front door. I unlock it and nervously say thank you, but he, instead of ringing the doorbell or doing their famous police officer knock, follows me into my house and locks the door behind us. He's talking to me, making small conversation, checking out my living room, and I'm starting to freeze up because I'm suddenly sensing a different energy from him. He asks me where my bedroom is. He tells me to take him to it. I instead took him to my parents' room and turned on the light, 100% thankful to see my sleepy-eyed parents, shocked to see an armed grown man behind their young daughter. And he just lets out a breath and says in my ear, you lied to me, sweetheart. He goes back into police mode, telling my parents that he found me out at an illegal time and that I'd need to pay a fine and attend a class. It was so embarrassing because I was 18 by that time. I had to take the class with a bunch of 12 to 14-year-olds anyway. I never tell anyone until now about the comments he made to me, but my dad did ask him why he was in our house. I told him I didn't understand that either. He never read me any rights. He just followed me home. Before he leaves, he says, that's a nice house phone you have right there. Looks new and shiny. As the last thing he tells me before letting me go. I can't help but think back to the night and thinking about what would happen if I had bad parents who weren't home or were out of a town, etc. I know there are good cops out there. I personally know some. I go back and forth with being freaked out. Okay, maybe he was just being thorough. The comments are what stuck with me though, and that sinking gut feeling